Let's look at the top 10 quarterbacks from week 4 for the 2025 NFL Draft. This is a fun segment. It's my favorite segment every single week. Get a blog post out. We started doing YouTube videos now. Also got it on the podcast. So it's all like the greatest stuff you could combine to make the greatest list of all time. And everybody's got a differing opinion. Everybody's got different things that they look for in quarterbacks more than others. These lists, for my sake anyways, are going to be different than what my opinion is come draft time. Obviously, the draft's in April. We are sitting here on September 26th. It is 10:28 on September 26th right now. My opinion could change next week. Once October kicks off, I could have a completely different opinion about a player. Completely different opinion. But this is week to week. Every single week is going to be different. A quarterback could play a very good team and look really good. A quarterback could play a really bad team and look really bad. Like, crazy stuff happens all the time. Not everybody's going to be on their A game all the time, but that's the thing with the NFL draft. There's so little margin for error. Every little thing each quarterback does will be scrutinized. Every little thing. We talked about that last week with Shedeur Sanders. With all the little things that he does, whether it's talking to the media or talking to players after the game, it will be heavily scrutinized. But as a player, you can't say anything about his talent. Shedeur Sanders is an immensely talented player. Where people view him in the draft board come April, will vary on how his interviews do. How his pre-draft interviews does. How he does at the combine in regards to the interview process. Because that's the most important thing. Like the on-the-field workout, yes, that's really good if you're an immense athlete. Like an Anthony Richardson. Like the combine is built for players like that. DK Metcalf. What was his name? From the Eagles, who got drafted 7th overall by the Eagles. Mike Mamula from the Eagles, who trained every single drill he did during the offseason was drills that they did at the combine. So obviously he blew up the combine. His draft stock raised because of it. But for quarterbacks, most of the time, the interview process is where you make or break your draft stock. That's where you make or break it. And there's been times where I wouldn't be shocked Shedeur Sanders fell to the second round. I wouldn't be shocked by that statement. Obviously, because I said it, shouldn't be shocked by my own statement. Like, oh my God, Logan, you just said that? That is insane. That's blasphemous. But no, I don't think that's too out of the question. Will Levis, I've brought this up before. Will Levis thought he was going to get drafted 4th overall the night of the draft, and he ended up being the 2nd overall pick in the 2nd round of the draft. He had a quote that said, "I wouldn't show up to the draft if I knew I wasn't getting taken high." Something along those lines. I'm paraphrasing a little bit, of course, but it's something along those lines. He ended up going with the 2nd pick of the 2nd round. Everything is on the table when it comes to the draft. And it's going to be very interesting. And as for Shedeur Sanders, for this week, I have him as QB1. For this week. We had him as QB1 last week after the win against Colorado State. We have him as QB1 for his win against Baylor. Colorado's win against Baylor. This game was an odd one. This was an odd one because I think if you polled the general public, I think most people out there would have picked Baylor to win this game. I think most people out there, I know Colorado was the favorite. I know Colorado was at home. I know it was a night game and all that stuff. I think if you polled the general public, most people would have said Baylor would win this game. Without knowing anything about Baylor, I think most people would have picked Baylor to win this game. That's how people view Colorado. Because if you remember back to last year, Colorado had that great start to the season. They started off 3-0. They beat TCU, Nebraska, Colorado State in overtime. Like, it was just this really fun start to the season. Once conference play hit, completely different team. Like, it's like Cinderella. The carriage is going to turn into a pumpkin at some point. You just got to make sure everything's in line before it does turn back into a pumpkin. And that's kind of what Colorado was. Colorado started 3-0. They ended up finishing 4-8. They got one conference win. It was against Arizona State. Bar? Question mark? Like, it wasn't a fun season. And they still talk. So it kind of rubs people the wrong way. Shedeur Sanders kind of rubs people the wrong way. So again, if you polled people, I'm sure most of them would say Baylor was going to win this game, regardless of what Baylor was as a team, regardless of how many games they've won previously, or how many games they've lost previously. And if anything, it might not even be that they think they're going to win because of what they've studied. It's just because of the fact they don't like Colorado. They don't like Dion. They don't like Shedeur. They don't like what they stand for. Whatever. X, Y, Z, they picked Baylor. Now, obviously, that's not everybody. It's not everybody, but just given what we have seen to this point, it would be kind of hard to sit there and go like, oh my God, you're absolutely crazy for picking Baylor. And it started off like that. Like Baylor in this game was up for a vast majority of the game. They were up 24-10 with just under 5 minutes to go in the first half. Like the game was kind of going. They had a 100-yard kick return in there. 100-yard kick return in there. But Shedeur Sanders made some plays that kept Colorado in this game. He had a rushing touchdown. Like Shedeur Sanders set a career high in rush attempts and a season high in rushing yards. Though his dad is Deion Sanders, Shedeur Sanders is not the most fleet-footed quarterback in college football. It's kind of surprising. Just because his name's Sanders. He's Shedeur Sanders. He's Deion Sanders' kid. The greatest athlete in American sports history, probably. Depending on who you ask, obviously. I don't know a lot of other players that would play in a World Series game or an MLB game and an NFL game in the same day. I don't know how many other people could do that. Like the greatest cornerback of all time, one of the most electrifying athletes of all time, and Shedeur Sanders is not a great mover when it comes to running the ball with his legs. As opposed to running the ball with his hands, obviously. Thanks, Logan. That was a great analysis you had there. But he had like 26 yards on the ground, made some big plays. Like there was a play that he had running the ball right before he threw his first passing touchdown of the game. I had to make sure. It was his first touchdown. He only threw 2 touchdowns of the game. But right before he threw his first one, he had a 14-yard pickup where he showed a lot of really good effort on the play, not going down. The pocket swarmed in around him, and he pretty much got sat on his ass. Like if you screenshot at the right spot, he's pretty much in a full squat position. Weight trainers around the country were clapping their hands because he got to perfect depth. Shedeur Sanders got to perfect depth. And he still managed to get out of it. He rolled out to his right, reversed, kind of reversed, but then cut up field and got a nice 14-yard gain, ran out of bounds with it. The very next play, we see him escape the pocket again, deliver a ball down the sideline to Marion Miller, who at first glance looks like he gets tackled around the 34-yard line. And guess what? He shows great effort too, bounces up, and while the Baylor defenders are asleep, he runs right past him and gets a 58-yard touchdown with 50 seconds to go in the first half. So getting the score from 24-10, 24-17, now the momentum seemingly is on Colorado's side. Which would you like to think anyways? Now the second half didn't really start off like going back and forth. Colorado had a couple punts. Baylor turned it over on downs. They had a punt in there themselves. But then Colorado was able to find the end zone with about a minute left to go in the third quarter. Had a touchdown run. Michael Welch, 2-yard touchdown run in there. They tied the game up. That's what you like to see. Interesting game here. We had Travis Hunter connecting with Shedeur Sanders for a 46-yard gain. We had Shedeur Sanders hitting Travis Hunter down the near sideline on a corner route with defenders all in his face. Travis Hunter made it a really nice diving catch, 31-yard gain there, basically set up the touchdown. And then Baylor punted. Colorado turned it over on down. Shedeur Sanders took a sack late in the drive. Then Baylor scored again. Sawyer Robertson had a touchdown run. Colorado had to punt again because Shedeur Sanders took 2 sacks, got him all the way down to the 4-yard line, their own 4-yard line. They punted it. Baylor got great field position, but thankfully they missed the field goal. And then Colorado gets a chance to tie the game up. If Baylor makes that kick, the game's over. The game is done if they make that kick. He misses it. Colorado goes down the field. They get a shot. Go for it on 4th down, I think once or twice in the drive. Get them. And then they have a couple shots towards the end zone. First attempt. Gets it down the field. Dropped. Hit him in the hands, hit him in the face, dropped. Now, he would have fallen over at the 1-yard line or 2-yard line or something like that, so he'd probably need to sprint down the field and spike the ball, because once the chains get set, then you're going to run a play, or they just go up and run a play. Who the hell knows? He wouldn't have scored based off, maybe he keeps his balance somehow if he gets the ball. I don't know. But then the next play, Shedeur Sanders, Baylor stacks all their pass rush to the right side of Colorado's offensive line. Brings everybody that side. Shedeur Sanders rolls out to his left, hucks it down towards the end zone. LeJohntay Wester with a touchdown catch. LeJohntay Wester with a diving catch. To tie it up, force overtime. Colorado scores to start overtime, and then Baylor fumbles at the 1-yard line. Into the end zone. Touchback. Colorado wins. Storm the field. while the play is still getting reviewed. Not necessarily the most ideal if turns out Baylor actually scored a touchdown on that play. So they got to try and get a bunch of drunk college kids back into the stands. Yeah, not going to be the easiest task in the world. And it would have been really funny had that play, like in a cynical way, had that been counted as a touchdown, Baylor goes on to win that game. That would be pretty freaking hilarious. But as for Shedeur Sanders as a whole, it's a good game. I think he showed a lot of effort in this game, which is what you want to see from a quarterback, not just in throwing the ball. He kept things moving with his legs. 19 carries. That's not something Shedeur Sanders. That's a career high by a pretty decent margin. I want to say his previous career high was 14. Like, he barely runs for it 5 times in a game, let alone 19 times in a game, and pick up positive yards. That seems to be a never-occurring thing for Shedeur Sanders, because in college they count sacks as rush attempts. So that really drastically hurts their rushing yards. But he played well. Gave Colorado a chance to win, and they ended up doing so. That's what you want to see. I know there's a lot of distractions off the field, but just from a player standpoint, there's a lot to like with Shedeur. I don't know where he'll go come April. I don't know. Like, my gut says he feels like a Raiders player. That's what my gut and head tells me. He feels like a guy Antonio Pierce would really like. That's what again, head and gut are telling me that. I don't know if that's going to end up being the case or not. I don't know how raw people will view him going into the draft. Maybe teams think that, we can turn him into a starter week 1. I highly doubt it, but I also didn't necessarily think Anthony Richardson would be the week 1 starter for the Colts last year, and that's what happened. So crazier things have happened, but I wouldn't be shocked if he went top 10. I wouldn't be shocked if he went in the second round. I don't know, but as from a talent standpoint, he's very talented. In this game, he looked really good, especially in Colorado's first Big 12 game since 2010. Now, they are playing UCF this week. That's a lot tougher opponent than Baylor, in my opinion, because UCF is going to want to control the clock. They run the ball really well. Harvey and Jefferson, the quarterback running back tandem, they're under Gus Malzahn. They're going to want to run the ball. Now, the UCF does not have the greatest pass defense of all time, but Colorado's defense is going to be dead tired in this game. It's going to be a rough one. It's going to be, especially since it's down in Orlando. That's going to be a very tough game. Colorado winning it wouldn't be surprising, but I think on paper right now, I would say that UCF will probably win. Well, time will tell. Time will tell. Number 2 on this list is Carson Beck. They had a bye week. Georgia had a bye week. They're taking on Alabama in Tuscaloosa this weekend, so that's going to be a very, very fun game. Number 4, Alabama versus number 2, Georgia. Speaking of Georgia, they were once the number 1 team in the nation. Texas is the number 1 team in the nation now. Quinn Ewers is number 3. There's some people that say Quinn Ewers is QB1 in this draft. It kind of depends on who you ask, because there's no firm answer at this point in time in this draft class, because we just don't know. We knew that going into the season that there was going to be some question marks. Like, it was pretty obvious who at the start of the season would be QB1 and QB2, but as the season progressed, that was obviously going to change throughout the season. But Quinn Ewers obviously did not play as the oblique injury. He got that last week against, UTSA. Texas played Louisiana Monroe this past week and came out very comfortable winners. They won 51-3. Arch Manning got his first start. They haven't closed the door officially on Quinn Ewers playing this weekend. I would doubt it. At this point, they're playing Mississippi State. I don't think there's a very high chance Mississippi State wins, regardless of who the quarterback at Texas is. I like Arch Manning. I like Quinn Ewers. I like Quinn Ewers more now than I did at the start of the year. I wasn't the biggest fan of Quinn Ewers, but he has grown on me a lot. I liked the progression that we saw from him last year, from the season prior. Like, there was definitely an emphasis on losing weight, getting in shape, and running the ball. Like, getting more mobile, be not as much as a statue before. I like the progression Quinn Ewers has made. So I think that if he's playing, Texas have a chance. And it's just kind of funny how it is, because Arch Manning is a Manning. So there's going to be fans of him regardless. It doesn't really matter how good Quinn Ewers does. People are going to be clamoring for Arch Manning to get in the game. That's just going to be how it is. And that's unfortunate for Quinn Ewers. But it hasn't affected his play up to this point, because sometimes quarterbacks, when these kind of situations can kind of crumble, it, again, hasn't affected Quinn Ewers up to this point. We'll see how that affects him the rest of the season, especially if Arch Manning, if he does start, has a good game against Mississippi State. And then people, I'm not saying the coaching staff will, because I wouldn't worry about it, but Texas fans, if they start clamoring for Arch Manning, we'll have to wait and see. Number 4 is Cam Ward. They had a weird game against USF, which was kind of expected. Because USF is a very interesting team. USF is competitive for a half, and then they're done. They're competitive for a half against these big schools, and then done. They did this to Alabama a couple weeks ago. We're in the game early. Alabama pulled away late. They did it this week. They were up 15-14 against Miami. I think that was the score, 15-14. Miami ended up winning the game 50-15. Cameron Ward in the game, 3 touchdowns, had an interception on his first drive of the game, also had 43 yards rushing, had 404 yards passing in the game. He has 14 touchdowns, 2 picks on the season, 89 yards rushing. Cameron Ward, as we're in the conversation talking about who could be QB1 come April, and it's a fluid chart that could change throughout the year, Cameron Ward, it would not be surprising to me if he ended up being QB1 come the draft. It would not surprise me at all. Like, if you look at what he did at Washington State, he always had the talent. It was just, can he be consistent with everything? And so far this season, he has been really consistent with it. Miami's offense is the most high-powered offense in college football at this point in time. They are awesome offensively. Cam Ward and Xavier Restrepo's relationship out wide has been really fun to see. I don't think I've seen Xavier Restrepo actually sprint once this season. It feels like every single touchdown pass that he has from Cam Ward is a nice little jog. It's like it's a walkthrough rep. Like, before the game starts, the quarterbacks are warming up the receivers. The receivers like doing a little half jog. Quarterbacks just try to float it in there so they can get a little breadbasket catch down the sideline just to get things warmed up before the game. That's what it kind of feels like at times between Ward and Restrepo. That's what it seems like. But Ward has all the talent with a lot less distractions off the field. Ward has the arm. Ward has an insane arm. Ward is a lot more mobile than some of the other quarterbacks in this draft. You might even say most quarterbacks in this draft class are not as mobile as Cameron Ward. The consistency, that's the only thing that I think could be a big concern, but he's been consistent up to this point. Now, it hasn't been against the most insane teams of all time, because it's been against what? Florida A&M, Ball State, and USF. Like, not the greatest teams of all time. So we'll see how he does against Virginia Tech, who are a very weird team, I guess is the best way you could put it. Like, you remember this past weekend where the quarterback threw the ball in the back of the end zone, one of the funniest stages I've ever seen? Yeah, it's a very weird team. It's at Miami, I believe, so that'll be a very interesting. It was on Friday night, so night game down in Miami. But again, Cameron Ward, I think, has all the potential to be that QB1 come April. I really think so. And remember what we said back after the 2024 NFL draft, like a week after or the day after or whatever. Every single year, there's a quarterback that was not expected to go higher, like a top 2 pick, top 5 pick maybe, that was not expected to be in that range at the start of the season. Always feels like there's a quarterback in that range. Always feels like that. I'm not saying that it always happens, but it feels like that. And we said, who's going to be the Jayden Daniels this year's draft class? And with the Jayden Daniels this year's draft class, that obviously means a quarterback that has talent. Everybody knows he's talented. Everybody saw Jayden Daniels at Arizona State and knew he was talented. The problem with Jayden Daniels at the time was his consistency as a passer. He was an insanely athletic quarterback, but the problem was he was looking to run more often than he was looking to pass, especially at Arizona State. And when he first got to LSU, those bad habits were still kind of there. They were still kind of lingering in there. But as the season progressed, his first year at LSU, you saw him growing as a passer. And this past season, he became the best deep ball thrower in college football. Cameron Ward is not the same athlete that Jayden Daniels is. I'm not fearing Cameron Ward rushing for 1,000 yards. I don't fear that. I don't think that can happen. I think he's a great athlete, just not Jayden Daniels, Lamar Jackson-esque athlete. But Cameron Ward, older quarterback, much like Jayden Daniels. He was in his 5th season of college football, I believe. Cameron Ward, I believe, is also in his 5th season of college football. He was at Incarnate Word, transferred to Washington State, now he's at Miami. And with this quarterback class being as, I don't want to say confusing, as fluid, I guess, as it is, that could open the door for him being that Jayden Daniels' draft class. And I think he already is. I wouldn't be shocked if there's some draft boards right now that have Cameron Ward as QB1. I wouldn't be shocked if the Carolina Panthers took Cameron Ward with their first pick. Like, if I'm looking at these top 4 quarterbacks, I think these guys are first-round guys at this point in time. And I know a couple weeks ago we talked about, I wouldn't be shocked if only 2 guys went in the first round. But the more and more you think about it, the more and more it's like the need of the quarterback position raises quarterback values more than just their typical value, like where you have them on the value chart, I guess you could say. And we talked about that a couple weeks ago, where it's Like, if this team needs a quarterback, like, there were 4 quarterbacks taken with the first 3 picks, or there were 5 quarterbacks taken in the top 10. 6 quarterbacks taken in the top 12 this past year's draft. Were those 6 quarterbacks within the top 12 players in the draft? Maybe 3 of them. Caleb Williams, Jaden Daniels, Drake May, those 3. Other than that, McCarthy, Penix, Nix, they were not considered top 12 players, but teams needed quarterbacks, so teams took them. And the thing with the quarterback position is the most important position on the football field, so you want to make sure you get your guy and don't risk them falling to someone else. So I could see these 4 guys be first-round draft. I could see Drew Aller, who we have at number 5, who had a great game against Kent State this week, 309 yards, 3 touchdowns. Also had a rushing touchdown this week as well. Penn State as a team had 718 yards of total offense. And so a lot better performance against the MAC school than they had last week, or 2 weeks ago, because they had a bye week. But Bowling Green, man, they ain't no joke. They took it to Texas A&M. They lost to them, but they had a tough game. But Drew Aller, Jalen Milroe, he had a bye week this week. He could be a quarterback in that conversation. Jackson Dart from Ole Miss. They haven't really played a bunch of teams this year, but they're beating the crap out of them, like we talked about a little bit ago. Like, they might not be playing anybody, like, massive, but if you're not doing that, you know you're supposed to be a team that dominates these games. I need to see you beat the shit out of them. I need to see that. For my own sanity, I need to see that. And they've done that. Jackson Dart, 12 touchdowns this year, has 3 rushing touchdowns as well. Had 4 touchdowns and a pick, 382 yards this past weekend against Georgia Southern. Yeah, they're playing Kentucky. Kentucky's a tougher team. They took it to Georgia a little bit. They did get blown out by South Carolina, but Kentucky's a tough team. They are a tough team. Not as tough on the road as they are at home. This game's at home for Ole Miss, so I do think Ole Miss will come away with at least a 20-point win. I'm not sitting here saying they're going to win by 50 again, but 20 points, maybe. Let's just finish on the top 10 before we get back to the first round stuff. But Garrett Nussmeier, we have at number 8. 3 touchdowns, 352 yards passing against UCLA. Didn't register a carry or a rush yard against a yard, let alone a carry against UCLA. They won 34-17 in the purple uniforms. Will Howard raised 1 spot. He had a bye week this past weekend. But they play Michigan State on the road, so that could be very interesting. Garrett Nussmeier and LSU play South Alabama. That'll be a high-scoring game because LSU's defense is not great. South Alabama scored 87 points 2 weeks ago. This will be a very, very fun game. I'd very much recommend you tune in to LSU versus South Alabama. Ohio State versus Michigan State. Michigan State's got some solid players. Aiden Childs, very raw, but he's got talent. So maybe he could cause some problems. Highly doubt it. I think Ohio State goes in there and handles business relatively easily. But, hey, you never know. Will Howard, or no, he didn't have a bye week this past. I'm getting confused. Will Howard, 2 touchdowns. He had a bye week 2 weeks ago. 2 touchdowns and a pick. Had a rushing touchdown there against Marshall. Connor Wegman dropped out of the top 10, and in at number 10 this week, we have Riley Leonard. Got his first passing touchdown of the season, which is insane to think about that we're played 4 weeks already. he's played 4 games, and just now got his first passing touchdown. Riley Leonard has a lot of talent. He has a lot of talent. He's got a good arm, still needs to work on some of the deep throws, but he's got a decent arm, and he's very mobile. And it seems like his teammates want to play with him. He's very tough. He's a very gritty player. I think people want to play with him. And in this game against Miami of Ohio, he had 145 yards rushing. He had 3 total touchdowns this game, 1 passing, 2 rushing. He had 154 yards through the air as well. This season, 322 yards rushing with 6 touchdowns. He's a very big threat running the football, and they're better when he runs the football. Notre Dame has a rushing offense, and he's the He's the catalyst for the rush offense. Notre Dame plays really well. And against Louisville, they're going to need to have all their things clicking in the right direction, moving in the right direction for this game. But Riley Leonard, I think he deserves to be back in the top 10 because there wasn't a lot of other like big-time performances from quarterbacks outside the top 10 that could get into that spot, depending on who you ask. But others that we have in here, Brady Cook, 2 touchdowns against Vanderbilt this weekend, an overtime win. Cade Klubnik, 3 touchdowns, had a rushing touchdown there as well with 70 yards rushing, at 209 yards passing against NC State. Miller Moss for USC did not have the greatest game against Michigan, but still ended up with 3 touchdowns in the game. We have Donovan Smith from Houston. They struggled as a team against Cincinnati. I'm not going to put that all on Donovan Smith. His interception was unfortunate. 73 yards passing, though, with 27 yards rushing. Not great, but did total 100 yards total offense. That's cool. And then Connor Wegman dropped out of the top 10, did not play, still dealing with that shoulder injury as Texas A&M beat Bowling Green 26-20. But back to the original talking point with first-round picks and where I could see them going. Like Shedeur Sanders, Carson Beck, Quinn Ewers, Cameron Ward, I think all I would consider guys that would go in the first round. This is my opinion. This is not like going off of what could happen. Because again, I'll reiterate, I wouldn't be shocked if Shedeur Sanders fell to the second round. I would not be shocked by that. But in my opinion, I think he's a first-round player. Aller, Milroe, Dart, I think those guys could be in those conversations as well as the season progresses. We'll have to wait and see. But if I'm picking teams for each of these guys, again, I think Shedeur Sanders feels like a Raiders pick. I think if they keep Gardner Minshew there, or even just have Aiden O'Connell there, I think they could be a nice bridge quarterback for Shedeur Sanders. I think that'd be nice for him. Carson Beck feels like a Giant. He just feels like a New York Giant. Just look at him. Look at him. He's 6'3", 6'4", 215 pounds. Like, he's decently mobile, which if Brian Dable keeps his job, I think he could be a guy that fits well in there. I think Drake May would have been more of the archetype that Dable would be looking for from a quarterback, but Carson Beck, I think, could fill that mold for the New York Giants. Quinn Ewers, I could see him being a Cleveland Brown. Maybe it's because of the orange uniform, but I think a Carolina Panther would be fitting in there too. I think he would fit well in there. I could see David Tepper falling in love with him. I think he's got a good arm. I think he would fit that mold of what Canales has had throughout his time as an offensive coordinator. You look at what Baker Mayfield, look at Geno. I think Quinn Ewers could fit that mold. So maybe Carolina a little bit more. And then Cameron Ward, Carolina and Cleveland again. I think the Browns definitely need to look at a quarterback just because of the contract situation. I don't know if they could get out of it, but just have somebody else there. I think Drew Aller, for regards to the windy conditions, playing on the lake in Cleveland, I think he has the arm to get that. I think out of the arm strength out of this draft class, I think he has the strongest arm. I think him and like Garrett Nussmeier probably have the two strongest arms out of the top options in this draft, but I could see Drew Aller being a guy the Browns definitely look at, especially since he's not a guy that I think could play right away. I think out of all these guys, I think he would be one of those guys that sits for a little bit. And Deshaun Watson's still there. I don't know how urgent they would be to get him out the door. So I would say Drew Aller would be a nice little project piece for the Cleveland Browns, I guess you could say. But Cameron Ward, yeah, he's going to be one to watch. Cameron Ward's going to be one to watch come draft time, because I think there's a lot of different directions he could go, and I wouldn't be surprised if he was the first quarterback taken. I wouldn't be surprised if he was the fourth quarterback taken. I think he's a first-round player. I think his stock's only going to continue to rise, especially if Miami's offense keeps playing like it does, especially when they go into ACC play. I know the ACC is not necessarily the toughest conference in the world, but Miami's had solid offenses before. They've had very solid offenses before, and they've fallen apart once conference play starts. So if Miami can keep that going and Cameron Ward keeps that going, I think not only he could be one of the top quarterback taken in the draft, I think he could be the front runner for the Heisman Trophy as well, which I think he already is. But you want to be the front runner for the Heisman Trophy in November much more than you would be in September.